Welcome back to Earth Chronicles, Book 1, The Fifth Pinnacle by H.G. Shuler. Chapter 16, Childhood Trauma, the Civil War, and Foreign Voices. When she was 10 years old, Angela's mother died during a summer of intense heat. To this day, she can still feel the sweat that was on her mother's forehead after kissing her for the last time. She can still see it, can taste it on her lips. "Take care of your father and your sister," she had said. "Your sister's younger and less capable. Remember that. She's going to need you." And then she was gone like a wonderful breeze that blows for a while, then leaves without much notice, quiet without commotion, leaving you in want. When she was gone, Angela looked around their modest wood plank house. Its totality was 3 bedrooms, a narrow hallway, kitchen, and living area with a fireplace. Its walls, filled with tiny cracks of white plaster, were smooth like new leather. Its floors of yellow pine, dented and marked, displayed some 60 years of boots, broken dishes, animal paws, and embers. The next day, they buried her. The next week, they departed the house forever. The pain burrowed inside her. Due to his work as a well-known brain surgeon, her father had been mulling over a job offer to teach at the Royal College of Physicians. He had been mulling it over for months. However, after the death of her mother, he quickly accepted and moved his daughters from the rolling countryside of Surrey to the massive city of London. By today's standards, this was no more than a rock's throw away, but in the early 19th century, it seemed like a million miles. Later, she was educated at the same college, and after 25 years as a physician, she came back as his peer and fellow teacher. Together, they blazed a trail in brain research, setting the accepted standards and catapulting them to fame. Through all those years, Angela never lost her love of the countryside, nor the pain of leaving it. When her father died, she did something she had dreamed of for years. She took a ship across the sprawling ocean waters to New York, then onward to Philadelphia, where she had a job waiting for her at the Perelman School of Medicine, where she was allowed to continue her research. During her off time, she would take long trips to the countryside, eventually falling in love with Gettysburg. Shortly after her retirement, she rented a house and moved away from the city, hoping it was her last home. She squatted next to the soft, fresh-smelling garments. Just plucked from the clothesline, they were sitting folded on the seat of a sofa. Her arms slid comfortably under them. She stood up, pointing in the direction of the bedroom, and then heard an unexpected knock at the door. The visitor, Mr. Simmons, her landlord, did not wait for her to answer before pushing it open. He began talking at a fast pace. "Forgive me for intruding, Miss Gall. I just came from town, where I heard rumors of fighting north of Gettysburg. They say the war's converging right on top of us. Others say it's just a skirmish like they had in Virginia 2 weeks ago. I'll keep you posted when I hear more. But right now, I have a cow to rescue from the creek. It may take me until dark, so I wanted to drop your mail off first. You've got a parcel from your sister and another letter from that fella in Florida. Tallahassee, I believe it is. I see you have your hands full, so I'll just set them here next to the coat rack and be on my way. Sorry for the rush." And just like that, he was gone before she could even say thank you. She turns away from the door towards the bedroom, but then stands silent. After a moment, she looks over her shoulder, peering at the mail. With the clothes still in her hands, she looks back at the bedroom door, then again back over her shoulder at the mail. When she realizes that she's been standing there for over a minute, she dumps the clothes back on the sofa, rushes over, and picks up the letter. Ripping it open with her bare fingers, she starts reading. "Dear Miss Angela Renee Gall." Never taking her eyes off the letter, she walks with an anxious restlessness and sits on the edge of the sofa, next to the haphazardly placed laundry. After only the introduction, she has drifted hopelessly into its words, subconsciously giving away an already rooted desire. "I'm writing you this correspondence with the hope that you're doing well. It has come to my attention only just moments ago that this deplorable war has advanced closer to the safety net of your beloved Pennsylvania. I've said a prayer for you in your beautiful, quaint town of Gettysburg. Possibly you will be spared the savage nature of advancing troops. Be they of blue or gray coats, they will undoubtedly be of determined, even desperate minds. This cannot be held against them, as they are all of them loyal to their cause and only want to finish the thing the higher-ups have sent them out to do. I fear that many of them, mixed and intertwined with war's warm bravery and cold, dirty tricks, will never see their families again. I hear General Lee is a brilliant tactician, fearing nothing, and continues pushing his troops northward. The signs are not in place telling us that we might see a quick solution. Neither do we expect a peace treaty to save the divided country its impending huge casualties. May your faith, which you have in earlier correspondence discussed, sustain you in such difficult times as these. As you may be aware, the war has not as yet reached the fresh new state of Florida and is not expected to do so. I have written you twice already, and I do so again in a sincere effort to persuade you to move here for the purpose of assisting me with my studies on the brain. I would be remiss if I didn't point out its proximity to safety. I hope you do not see this as an underhanded way to prod you into giving in to my pleas. It's just that I desperately need your help, and you are living in war's perilous pathway. At this time, it is not known to me anyone living in the States that has even near the accomplishments regarding brain research like that of yourself. Although you have previously made it clear to me that you are happy living in retirement, I once again, embarrassed as it makes me feel, entreat you to accept my offer. Please consider semi-retirement as a viable and fulfilling option. You will be afforded a comfortable place to live and a handsome stream of income largely surpassing your esteemed teaching days. If I have not in earlier correspondence made it clear to you what the area I am asking you to move to is like, let me with enthusiasm do so now. Where I have my house and adjacent buildings, one of which you will reside in, others of which I lease out to the state government, is a mix of rolling hills and flatland. The wildness of the area, once galloping out of control, has been corralled and tamed over the course of the last 2 decades. Its incredible beauty has emerged like the birth of an infant child. Its acres of grass fields, spiraling in green and golden tones, resemble the color of sunlit wheat. Much to the delight of local Floridians such as myself, the area's freshwater is abundant. Its soil is rich for farming. There are deep springs nearby where fresh water bubbles from the ground, forming rivers so clear that their depth cannot be understood with the eye. Where fish on the bottom look as though they are only at a hand's reach, although in reality they may be more than 10 or 15 feet away. It is believed that the water travels underground from faraway places in the Appalachian Mountains. The city of Tallahassee, of which we are adjacent to, has 2 large mercantile trading stores. Both of these have a women's boutique. There is also a standalone dress shop with a seamstress known for her fine quality. I'm quite sure you will lack nothing in your usual standard of clothing. We will attend to any of these kinds of needs promptly after your arrival. This is with the joyful hope, of course, that you will, with the spirit of a pioneer, accept my offer to be my teacher. I will explain more about my work, which I believe is of great importance, once we have ample time to sit. As for my daily goings-on here, my work with you on the understanding of the brain will take precedence over my other many ventures. I give my word. In addition to my leasing interest, I own 2 sugar plantations and 1 cotton plantation. 5 years ago, I purchased and installed my own cotton gin, which I hire out to other plantations when I am done with the harvest of my own. I am telling you this so that you will know that you will lack for nothing if you should decide to move here. My income would rival any businessman in the southern states, and I have been told would surpass all except 3 of them. If I included my interests in Europe, there would be no contest whatsoever. As far as transportation goes, we have steamboat navigation on the larger rivers, such as the Apalachicola and the St. John's. There are railroads planned, with some already being installed. However, if you accept my offer, you need to understand that there are no railways between Tallahassee and St. Augustine, the place which you would be arriving by ship. From there, I would meet you, and we would travel by coach for the final duration of your trip. I just have one other matter to discuss with you. I have heard that many people outside of the southern states have a great concern about Indian hostilities in Florida. Also, the perception that Tallahassee is a haven for runaway slaves, many of which are violent. Let me put your mind to rest if you indeed have heard the same said conversations. The Seminole Wars have been long since over. Under President Andrew Jackson, the U.S. government spent $20 million and the lives of many U.S. soldiers, Indian people, and U.S. citizens to force the removal of the brave Seminole. The ones that were not caught have left voluntarily or escaped to the Everglades far away. As for runaway slaves, most of these are good family men and hard workers on the area's many plantations, including mine. I will stay neutral on the debate about slavery, which along with high tariffs have for some time now divided this still young and fledgling country. I can tell you that I own no slaves. Everyone under my employ is paid a fair salary. I have seen no more threat of violent slaves in Tallahassee than in any of the states above us. I felt I should address this subject, as it has kept a good many people from moving to the beautiful, sunny state of Florida. I suppose for the time being, my attempts to sway you have come to an end. Please give yourself time to consider my offer. If I have not heard from you in a month's time, I shall take it that you no longer want to correspond with me, at which point I will, along with my wife, pay you a visit. Maybe my presence would be more convincing. If nothing more, at least I would be able to look into your eyes and see if they are filled with fortitude to remain in Gettysburg. What I really expect to find is a sparkling glimmer of the adventurous person I think you are. You and your late father are one and the same. Trailblazers in your field, unafraid of the unknown. Miss Gall, you will find that my wife and I are of the same sort. I believe that we will all get along in a superior fashion, and I believe that, given the chance, we will blaze our own trail, possibly moving your brain research to a completely new frontier. With all sincerity, James H. Jenkins. Having finished the letter, she pressed it tightly against her chest. Then she closes her eyes and inhales a slow, deep breath while thinking about her father, remembering everything about him. All the details seem fresh in her mind. How he dipped his head slightly when he was in deep thought. How he would always hold the door for women, no matter their color or age. How in a grieving situation, he was never afraid to cry in front of his family. She remembers after the death of her mother, how he would always help her with the housework. And she remembers how he talked with graceful, straightforward words, like this man, Mr. James Jenkins. Though she did not know this at the time, she had made her decision right then. She was going to blaze that trail with Mr. Jenkins, and she was going to traverse new, unknown ground, like the adventurous, unafraid pioneer she knew in her heart she was. Still thinking of her father, she kisses the letter, folds it, and slips it back into the envelope. Tilting her head down, she smiles as she looks at the laundry. Scooping it underneath her arms a second time, she walks it into her bedroom. Once inside, she hears the first faraway blast from a musket and turns toward the window. Peering outside, she hears another and another until there's so many they seem as fireworks mixing together. Little does she know that the Union soldiers have just retreated through downtown Gettysburg. They were now in a violent skirmish with the Confederate graycoats, attempting to make a defense at Cemetery Hill, less than a mile from her homestead. She places the clothes on her bed and begins putting them away while fidgeting and rotating an eye at the window, keeping watch outside. She had heard musket shots before from hunters and nearby neighbors who would sometimes target practice. But this was strikingly different, and she knew it. Once finished with the laundry, she walks outside to the front porch and stares in the direction of the gun blast. They hadn't slowed down, and she was growing antsier when she noticed a man riding hard, coming down the dirt road that leads to her house. She recognized him as her landlord, and when he comes close, he jumps off the horse before it comes to a complete stop. He runs up to the porch, pausing, out of breath, leaning his hands on his knees. He is still breathing with difficulty when he looks up at her, his eyes bulging, filled with torque like they will explode at any moment. The rumors are correct, Miss Gall. He hesitates again, breathing heavily. The war has reached Gettysburg. The fighting's not far away, and there are tens of thousands of more soldiers reported to be coming fast. There's no time to escape to Philadelphia. The East Road is already blocked. There's no way out. Everyone's staying put, so lock yourself inside, but first, chain up your horse. There are already reports of deserters. If your horse isn't chained, they'll surely take it. Do you have a chain? While glancing at the barn, she lifts one hand up over her eyes, attempting to block the glare of the sun. At the same time, she is stretching and pointing with the other. Over there, under the lean-to. You left one hanging on the barn wall when you helped tow my buggy a few weeks ago. Do you have a lock? A lock. She looks back at the door to her cabin, places a hand on her forehead, and stares. A lock. I thought as much. Never mind, we've no time. He rushes over to his horse, slaps at the underneath side of his saddlebag. Flipping up the leather cover, he reaches inside. Then he rushes back. Take this. Chain your horse. Do it now, Angela. After that, get back inside, and no matter what happens, for God's sake, stay there. I'll check on you as soon as it's safe. Again, he rushes to his horse, mounts it with one sweeping jump, quickly kicking up a cloud of dust. In no time, he is again riding hard down the road. With alternating feelings of lightheadedness and clarity, Angela backs up, half sitting and half falling into a rocking chair. Oddly, she's intrigued at the sound of musket balls more than she is frightened. As she focuses on the commotion of the guns blasting away, momentarily, she wonders why she has no necessity of silence. Quickly dismissing the thought, she becomes deeply engrossed in the spectacular sounds coming from the forest. She had first moved here because the area was the definition of simplicity itself. It was a garden-like environment filled with larger trees than she had ever seen before and a whole world of creatures. A variety of birds with colorful, gorgeous plumage, plentiful deer, bear, fox, raccoon, and rabbits. The noises echoing from the forest now seemed a new species as they unexpectedly become mixed with emerging cannon blasts. Smoke rises over the distant trees, making the scene have all the strangeness of a dream. The rising smoke mixes with the soft currents of the air, drifting eastward so slow that a dragon's tail is being left in its wake. She hadn't really imagined the war would come so close, or that she would not see it as an imposing, threatening force. She could not make herself be scared and couldn't remember any truly fearful moments streaming out of her, even when she was a child. If there had ever been any fright in her, it was positively clear now that it had been left behind decades ago in the beginning years of her adolescence. The Battle of Gettysburg, now so completely underway and taking shape, seems to her a horrible yet natural event. She shakes her head, stands up, and starts out across her yard. She walks over a patch of hay thrown down to curb mud from a hard rain some 2 days ago, lifts a looped rope unlatching a gate, and enters the corral, a rough circle made of wood rail fencing. Her horse gives no trouble as it walks with her toward the barn. Under the lean-to, she lifts and pushes at the chain, noticing it's not as heavy as it looks. Once the horse is secured to a large support beam, she makes her way back to the house. Walking onto the porch, she without hesitation goes inside, locking the door behind her in obedience to her landlord. Her mental excitement of the letter she had only a short while ago read, along with the war so suddenly and surprisingly within reach of her cabin, was making her amazingly alert. Sitting at a small writing desk adjacent to a large window, she perched herself like a cat looking out over her front yard, barn, and pasture. She was now in a state of calmness, the house silent, the scene outside one of peace with the sun shining brightly over the barn. Unrestrained by the battle's close proximity, she sits back in her chair and rests comfortably. This is when she becomes afraid for the first time. Words from a foreign voice, meet her ears with astounding clarity. When winter comes and the snow spouts blow through the pastures, you must not be here. She is startled and turns to look behind her to the back of the house. Who is that? How did you get in? She stands up, keeping her hands on the desk. Answer me. Who are you and what do you want? Mr. Jenkins is waiting. How the devil? Do you know about him? Have you been reading my mail? Show yourself. She raises her right hand, slipping loose strands of hair behind her ear, then sucks in a quick breath, spouting it out her nose, attempting to build a small amount of courage. Heat building in her face is forcing her to sense her own building panic. The palms of her hands are now pressing hard against the desk. Show yourself, I said. You miserable coward. Do you hear me? Say something. Blasting cannons and musket balls that had seemed to her lost and faded to the back of her consciousness now come roaring back into her ears. For just a moment, she tilts her head down, squeezing her eyes together, trying to silence the surreal battle taking place less than a mile away. She waits, focusing, wanting to hear the voice, but there's nothing. Almost giving up, she opens her eyes, raising her head with a fierce expression beaming from her face. I don't believe in ghosts, and I know I'm not crazy, so talk to me whoever you are and wherever you're from. Just when she thinks the voice has left, it confronts her again. Out of snow-covered fields comes the red blade of a knife. From then forward, you will restlessly go from one task to another. What task? Who are you? What do you mean? You will reach your hand out into the field of snow, desperate from tragedy. A red blade, confusion, they're lurking. Tallahassee is waiting. If I agree to go, will you tell me who you are? Dimensions are separating. I still don't know what you're talking about. Who are you? You have everything we were looking for. I said, who are you? Dimensions are separating. Remember your father's work. Immediately after those words, she sees a Union soldier through the window running hard toward the barn. Stopping at the lean-to, he taps and rubs the horse frantically, jumping atop his bare back. His blue coat, fully buttoned and half covered in mud, flaps in a sudden burst of wind. Squeezing his legs, he turns his shoulders quickly, attempting to lead the horse away. Angela notices his hair is of golden tint and pushed sharply to one side. His suit is a plain shell cut, devoid of officer rank either on the shoulder facings, collars, or cuffs. Across his chest is a blue shoulder strap attached to a pouch with dove gray piping. She figures it to be for personal items or possibly food. When the horse doesn't budge, it suddenly brings to the soldier's attention its unmovable circumstance. Leaning forward, he shakes sharply and vigorously at the chain. It is obvious to Angela the soldier's boyish face. She figures him to be no more than 18. Jumping to the ground, he splats and kicks his way over the hay-sprinkled mud, runs out from under the lean-to, hightails it across the pasture, jumps a wood rail fence, and eventually disappears into the forest. She relaxes again, sinking back into the desk chair. Any possible danger from the blue-coat deserter now disappeared. So too has the foreign voice, now completely died out in the cedar-scented air of the cabin. How strange the voice differed from the grimmer reality of war that lay just outside her window pane. She sits still and silent at her writing desk, her mind now set off to wanderings. She pushes aside the war again, thinking exclusively about the amazing paradox of the voice. It was her estimation that the voice came not from another person hiding inexplicably somewhere in the cabin, but rather from the confines of her own consciousness. She does a brief examination of the order of the mind, quickly running through each supposed area of particular usage. After years of study, she had drawn the conclusion that the brain was like a large city in miniature, each area of the city for a different purpose, so too the brain. She had mapped it out, did a colorful diagram of it, and had become famous for it. Was there as yet another undiscovered section, one that might be capable of communication without the need of talking? She thought this idea possible but the brain as its source, unlikely. She, along with her father, had spent years studying and testing the boundaries of each section. In this moment of deep thought, it hits her. The body survives by its senses, each separate but working in unison with the others. It had always been her father's assertion that since the senses were separate with no apparent connection, there must be a part of the brain that acts as a coordinator. This hypothesis could never be proved. After years of study, it was abandoned as conjecture, shelved but never forgotten. Angela's encounter with the foreign voice has her thinking of a new, similar explanation. Although due to her extensive research she had ruled out the brain, she was now delving into a new, plausible possibility. Could there be another, not yet detected, bodily organ? One with the single function of coordinating the senses? One that has a unique skill? An organ with its own inherent sense of order, with the capability of aligning and directing like a conductor of music, a maestro of art. An organ with its own personal communication skills, one of which needs no vocal cords but only sensory perception. It could take the brain's interpretation of events, identification of people, and understanding of the environment, combine it with its own sensory information, use the nervous system's neural pathways to vibrate a pulse that can be received by the same organ in others. The communication going back and forth like a ball on an elastic string. An organ so powerful in its communication function that when on the rare occasions it's used, it appears an illusion. She sits thinking about the many documented cases of people hearing voices. She now knows that they are real and not just the dreams of mentally disturbed patients. Later in the day came a lull in the ragged rumble of the battle. For Angela, it would prove to be a false alarm, as she took it to mean it was safe to venture out. Suddenly, she thought of going to her landlords to discuss her options for leaving Gettysburg. More afraid of the voices she had heard earlier than the battle cries raging for most of the day, she changes into riding clothes. After attaching her horse and buggy, she casually rides off, acting as if the war is completely over. Her landlord is furious. "Have you lost your senses, Miss Gall? There are still skirmishes on the western border, and just down the road it's Cemetery Hill. It's about to erupt with even more intense fighting. Hundreds have already died, and it's only the start. Reports are that Generals Meade and Lee are close to arriving." Earlier this afternoon, the Union's 11th Corps had arrived, and the Union position was in a semicircle from west to north of town. The Confederate 2nd Corps under General Ewell began a massive attack from the north. The assault was repelled at Chambord Pike, but the Federals' General Reynolds was killed. Other divisions were attacking from Oak Hill and across the open fields north of town. Barlow's Knoll was overrun. A third phase of fighting with the Confederates attacking at Herbst Woods and on Oak Ridge finally caused the Union line to collapse. They then retreated through town to Cemetery Hill. "Miss Gall, Angela, the war is in our backyard. Haven't you any fear? You don't know what it's like out there. The whole town is groaning. Those poor soldiers. They're like a chicken someone has snatched up to cut its throat. I swear to God they haven't any better chance. The shooting has been like bands of wind cutting across the fields, sticking like honey to the faces and shoulders of soldiers. Haven't you seen the clouds from cannon blast rising up like hopeless prayers?" "I have indeed. Mr. Simmons, I don't know what I must have been thinking to come out in all this. Go back home, Miss Gall. Lock your door and stay inside till you've heard from me. Is your musket loaded?" "Yes, but if a deserter gets inside, sit yourself in a corner. If he threatens you, don't hesitate to shoot. Are you in need of anything, food, water?" "No, Then go. Get back in your buggy and go. And sakes alive, Angela, don't try this again." On her way back, she is stopped by a regiment of Union soldiers. One with the obvious markings of a high rank maneuvers his horse next to her. "Madam, the fighting is about to escalate. Are you close to home?" "I am, sir, and was just on my way there." "Would you mind telling me how large your house is, ma'am?" "If you will first tell me who you are." "I am Major General George G. Meade." "Good day to you, Major." He tips his hat. Good day to you, ma'am. If you're looking for a headquarters post, you may take my cabin. I'll turn back around and stay at my landlord's. My cabin has 4 rooms and is just a piece farther down the road. Indeed, ma'am. I was thinking of that very thing. You keep your cabin, though. I need something much larger. We'll be on our way now. I've got a battle to oversee. He tips his hat a second time, and the regiment crosses a road into a field headed for Cemetery Hill. When Angela squeezes the reins, readying to prod her horse, she is stunned by the scene in front of her. She leans back with the knowledge she will be sitting a while longer. Thousands of impressive Union soldiers are crossing the road, spanning a distance as far as her eyes can see, all with faces bristling with determination, pouring like a river into the fields. "Hello, stranger," one soldier shouts out as another sea of them plods their way out of the woods beside her, engulfing her carriage in a mass of blue. Another shouts, "Is this the way to the battle?" He's laughing as he adjusts his kepi-style forage cap. "I have first-rate news for you, miss," still another shouts. "Billy Yank is going to put a licking on Johnny Reb today." You'll hear them crying clear through the forest. This soldier's remarks are followed by a barrage of momentary laughter. It took 20 minutes for the bluecoats to clear the road. They look eerily beautiful, traipsing and scratching in an uneven march, mixing and swirling with the broad golden fields. She didn't know if they were being sincerely brave or if they were just too young to know any better. She thought to herself how they couldn't see any further than their nose. It would be close to 6 months later, and she would be having dinner with Mr. Jenkins and his wife in Tallahassee when she would hear the gruesome report. The Union suffered 23,049 casualties, 3,155 killed, 14,529 wounded, 5,365 captured or missing. The casualties on the Confederate side was harder to estimate, but it was believed between 23 to 28,000. The following morning, she is awakened by pounding on her door. She rushes from her bed and, before thinking, opens it. Standing before her is a tall, solid-built soldier with striking blue eyes. His face is grimacing, distorted by pain. She listens as he groans and cries pathetic, unintelligible words. Even so, she understands clearly he is asking for help out of desperation, anguish, and fear of death. Before she can make a reply, he stumbles towards her, startling her and falling dead at her feet. Astonished at seeing someone die, she leans down over the soldier, trying to think of something to do, realizing at the same time there is nothing she can do. "He didn't kill himself," she whispers out loud, gazing at a huge hole in his leg. Because he was a deserter, no one would feel sorry for him. So, she leans farther over him, looking into his sky-blue eyes, tears dripping from her cheeks. "You're so young," she whispers out loud again. "Did you ever even get the chance to kiss a girl? I bet you did at least once, and I bet she was pretty." After using her horse to drag his body to the barn, she locks herself back inside, now with a whole new concept of war. Sitting emotionless and quiet for most of the morning, she is now more determined to leave for Tallahassee. Watching through a writing desk window, she sees the occasional deserter run through her yard. Finally, she picks up her ink pen, spots another soldier attempting to steal her horse, and begins a letter to her sister, Beatrice. She will tell of the tragedy of Gettysburg, about her impending move, even of the deserter dying in plain sight. But she will not tell her of the foreign voice. For the time being, she will simply try to forget about it. For now, there are more pressing concerns. That's the end of Chapter 16 of The Fifth Pinnacle by H.G. Shuler. Be sure to return to YouTube to hear what comes next in Earth Chronicles, Book 1.